We're carrying on with our series, looking at the Psalms. Have you ever had one of those moments where you put your music on, put your tunes on, or your records on, and the song fits the moment like a glove, when it's just the perfect song for that moment? I've got Spotify, but it's free Spotify. So it basically means that I have less of those perfect moments. Sometimes, when I'm out for a run, and my mood and the weather, and most importantly the cookies align, it's like a song breaks out of the universe. It's like the universe gives me a song straight to my soul, and it just illuminates the moment. I've got a picture to show you in a second. I was listening to a podcast on the success of Taylor Swift's tour. I don't know if you've heard of Taylor Swift. Have you heard of Taylor Swift? Do you know she's been really successful? And the podcast basically said she's a good performer, it's a great show, but the appeal is the way that the songs reach out and connect to people. That is the real appeal. That's the real buy-in. She captures our hopes and dreams and our fears and our feelings. And she speaks as she writes, I think, to a generation. And she perfectly resonates with them. There's a connection. You feel like you're hearing your stories as you hear her stories. She articulates emotion. Songs, and I'm sure I'm not on my own in this, have this incredible power to reach into the depths of us and to speak to the depths of us and to help us through the darkest and most difficult times, to connect with us. Psalms, the series that we're going through now, are songs. Psalms, when we open them up in the Bible, are songs that connect us to God. It's how to do God and be human, reading through the Psalms. All the doubts you have, all the emotions that you have, all of the yelps of joy. And Psalms not only speak to us, to quote Vaughan Roberts, who I heard the other week, but they speak for us. They give us the words for life when we don't have the words. Like songs do, they help us think about the questions that we daren't ask, the doubts that we daren't share, and the words that we don't have. One of the reasons that church is so powerful, and I don't know if you know that, church is not going away anytime soon. You might be worried about it. Don't be worried about it. One of the reasons that church is so powerful, one of the things that you really love and will draw you and people like you back year on year on year on year, and there's lots of reasons, by the way, but one of those reasons is what we've just experienced 3 times already tonight. It's because we sing together. We experience all of that world of emotion together. We connect with God together. We bear our souls together. We find our souls together. We share deep lows together. We stand with people who at certain times don't have the words. At certain times, we don't have the words ourselves. And we share highs and joys. And we together experience all of the emotions of life and still see God in the picture. It might sound a bit too twee for you. And you might dismiss it in this moment because God's not top of your list. But my bet, probably could find a better expression than that, my call would be that somewhere down the line, you are going to need one of these songs, one of these 150 songs to your heart about who God is more than you will need any other song in your life. A song that can speak to you when you can't hear from anybody. A song that can explain exactly how you're feeling in your deepest fears. A song that will give you words when you're looking at death, or you're looking at divorce, or you're looking at illness, or you're looking at nervous breakdown, or whatever trouble you're looking at. There is a script for it that comes from God. My almost certainty, because I can look back through history and see the way that the human race has clung to these psalms, is that you're going to need one of these. Don't know what song that gets you through your day right now. I put Dylan on. or I go back to the 90s and put Oasis on when I'm feeling a bit low. But there have been times when I'm in dark places and I need one of these, and you'll be the same. So we're looking at Psalm 3. It's a song that we're going to need, like others, and there is a simple title I've got above it. I don't know if you need any more ways to cry. First line of this title I've got is It's New Ways to Cry. You might be saying to yourself, I don't need any more ways to cry, Ash, but I'm going to give you some new ways to cry, some new ways to cry out, and some new ways to find peace. And what I'm going to say about those two things, that's the 2 points, new ways to cry, new ways to rant, and new ways to find peace. And what I'm going to say about both those is, hopefully by the time I've done, you'll realize that you need a new way to cry out. You'll need a new way to find peace. So the first point, new way to cry out. As we thought, as Jude prayed earlier, it's not always easy to say out loud how it actually feels to be a Christian, is it? You just tell everybody what's going on in your head, on your walk of faith. It's not easy to say out loud, if we're honest, exactly how it feels to be a Christian. Because, and this might just be me, the pastor, but I don't think that it will be. The truth of it is there's all sorts of doubts that we don't want to verbalize. There's all sorts of questions that we almost don't even say to ourselves. There's all sorts of personal mess that we wouldn't want anybody to find out about. There's actual resentment and anger probably towards God on some levels. So often, it's hard for us to be honest out loud with each other, with those nearest and dearest to you, even to yourself. And often, and this is my prayer experience, often to God in prayer, we daren't tell him what we're actually thinking. And yet, and I'd love it if you get into the book of Psalms with me as we go through this series on Psalms, get your head around this. At least a third of the Psalms in the Bible, so just flick through the Psalms when you get a chance, when you get home, at least a third of them, probably more actually, start something like this as a prayer, and it's a cry from the heart, it's a scream, and it's a yelp, and it's a tune, and it starts something like, this is impossible. Translate it back into 21st century speak from the Psalms and from the Hebrew. David screams out time and time again, this is impossible. Where are you? Are you watching this? I can't do this anymore. So I'm paraphrasing the kind of speak that David has. But often the Psalms sound like this, even though we don't talk like this. There's a backstory to the vent of David's that is up on the text. And you just talk to me if you relate to this. I'm just going to shuffle back because there is a backstory. Like there is with all of us. When we rock up to church, we've all got a backstory. We can all give it a line when we get here, but there's always a backstory to the songs that we sing and the tune that we have. David's backstory is something like this, and you can read about it in Samuel. We've studied it not too long ago. His family is broken, and that is breaking him. It's breaking his heart. He's broken by the rat race of life, this need for him to continue to be king. There's other people coming onto the scene. His son's one of them, and he's struggling in the rat race of life. And crucially, and I think you can see this in verse 1, everything he's called to be in God, this faithful servant, this king, this leader, is being increasingly opposed. Don't know if you feel that in your story of faith. Everything that you're called to be, everything that God has in mind for you to do, the way he wants you to be, is increasingly, it feels like, because it's a psalm and it's a song and it represents feeling, increasingly opposed. And worse, verse 2, and this is the worst thing. This is what chafes with me. This is what pushes my buttons in terms of keeping the faith. What's happening? The people are talking. That's the worst thing, isn't it? That's the worst pushback on your faith. The people are talking, and they're bruising him with what they're saying. God's not with you. Do you ever hear that voice? God's not going to save you. God's not around. That is a loud voice in our culture. It's a loud voice in my head sometimes. God's not around. 2 points I want to take from these first few lines. The first one is really simple. It feels like this sometimes. We might say that it's fine to God, to ourselves, and to each other, but the Psalms are a real, literal godsend, and that they help us realize to ourselves, they help us have this conversation, as songs do, they get to places that nobody else can get to, is sometimes it feels like this. If we're being honest with ourselves, our faith is pushed by the pressures in this world. Our faith is pushed when our home life is really tricky. Our faith is pushed when we get sucked into the rat race of life and we think we've got to be this amazing person all the time. Our faith is pushed when it feels like everything we try and stand for God is increasingly opposed. And the psalm puts it beautifully, I think. It's a beautiful picture because that's often how it feels, isn't it? And our faith is really pushed when people talk. The first thing I think the Psalms help us with, if you read through the book of Psalms, if that's part of your reading pattern, over and over again you see, actually it's hard, isn't it? And it's a script for us. Like good songs, it's able to, you know when you have a good song, a go-to song, you think, I need this song, I need to hear some of this lyric, I need to hear some of these words to get me through. Psalms help us do that. They help us explore all the tough parts of life, and they bring us out the other end. The second thing that I think that it shows us is that there is a time to cry out. You can't have that many Psalms in God's script, in God's playlist, that start on that level and it not be true. There is a time to be upset. There is a time to scream. There is a time to cry. There is a time to rant. That's what a lot of these Psalms are. Before you start thinking, brilliant, I'm glad you said that because I'm really cross with God and I have got a lot of stuff to say. It's not a Twitter license. This is not Twitter that we're talking about. Prayer's not like that. Psalms isn't just that you can scream and cry and rant. It's how you scream and cry and rant. If you're struggling with this concept, and I really was struggling with this concept, does God say this? I'm sure Jesus teaches us to pray in a really calm and relaxed way. One of the things that the Bible says, and it says it enough for me to declare it to you, and it resonated with me this week, is that God says to us, cast your cares on me. Think about that. God says to us, throw it at me. Throw it my way. Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden. He says, bring it. Bring all your troubles to me. Bring it all. Not just the delicate stuff, not just pray for me tonight, pray for my family, all of the rubbish and all of the difficulties that come our way. And not only does it say that, Jesus actually does it. Jesus screams out and cries out. Even Jesus, the one that we follow and in which is our hope. Probably most crucially, loudest, most beautifully on the cross, there is this lovely declaration from Jesus. There's this incredible revelation on the cross. So I don't know if you're familiar with this, but Psalm 22, I don't know if we were able to show it. This is what Jesus screams out on the cross. This is what he leaves over people. It's a cry, and it's not that dissimilar a cry to the cries that I make or that the psalmist makes here. He screams out, my God, why have you forsaken me? Where are you? Why are you so far from saving me? So far from the cries of my anguish. My God, I cry out day by day, but you don't answer. He screams that out. But to everybody listening, he doesn't scream out the whole psalm. But in a beautiful way, everybody listening knows the psalm. And for generations to come, we know the rest of this psalm will go. I don't know if we can show the rest of this psalm. He kind of leaves it hanging over people. He screams this out because it's the truth of where he is. But what hangs over people are the rest of the psalm. Yet, even though I'm in pain and anguish and it looks like I'm completely alone, and actually that's how it feels for me, and I'm screaming out and that's all still real and I need to do all that. Yet, at the same time, Jesus lets this known psalm hang over everybody that's watching him there on the cross. Yet you're enthroned as the Holy One. You are the one Israel praises. In you our ancestors put their trust. They trusted you and you delivered them. To you they cried out and were saved. In you they trusted and were not put to shame. This is a help to us. This is the how and the why we cry out, I think. We cry out, look at the end of that text. Part of the reason we can cry out and we should cry out is because we know what's coming. We know how it should be. It's what was proved when Jesus was raised from the dead. We can hang on to these words and we can scream out because we know that that psalm rings true. We know that there is salvation at the end. We know that it comes good in the end. We know that God's plan comes to fruition in the end. We cry out because we know how it should be. That's the cry. It's not an empty rant. It's not an empty, personal, individual diatribe, this. This is a full-hearted ache, not on our own, but with God. When we cry out and we're His, we don't just cry out into the night sky on our own. It's not just our own bugbears. We cry out because we know how it should be. That's where it comes from. It's a different cry. It's a different crying God's teaching us. And the other thing that we see, I think, is we cry because the relationship is real. That's what's going on in the cross. When Jesus talks to God, He is crying out to His Father. He's not just venting at Him, He's breaking His heart with Him. He's breaking His heart with Him at how messed up sin has made everything, how far apart we are, how much it hurts. When you've got a real relationship with somebody, when you've got a real connection with somebody, you don't just tell them that you like them all the time. Things don't just run smoothly all the time. It's not just doing stuff together. When you've got a real relationship, and I don't know, you'll only have a few of these in your life. But when you've got a real relationship, you can break your heart with somebody. You can cry on their shoulder. You can scream out your agonies and your pain. And it still makes sense. We cry. We should cry. We can cry because our relationship is real. We don't just have permission to cry. God gives us in Psalms a soundtrack. God doesn't just say to us, it's okay to cry. He says, here's how to cry. Here's how to cry out. The world, as we look around, not everywhere, but in enough places, is really broken. It really should be better. We kind of know it. He's a real friend. And if He's a real friend, we should really cry out to Him. There's permission to cry. There's a way to cry. When I look out there, there is a lot of... do you go on Twitter a lot, or X? I don't go on Twitter as much anymore. I can't handle it. It's just too depressing. It's too angry. There is a lot of angry venting out there, endlessly filling our threads and our airwaves and our headspace, just disappearing off into the cloud or wherever they disappear off to. And it could be that that's just because people like to vent. But it could be because people out there are desperate for something better. People ache for something better. People are searching for something better. People somewhere in their souls actually believe that this should be better. Last point. So we can vent and we can cry out, but there's also peace. Psalms pretty much always take us somewhere. They always take us to Jesus, but they pretty much always take us somewhere, even if it's just allowing us to speak and explore something. They don't just leave us worse than they found us. They take us somewhere. And here they take us to peace that's different. Verse 2. Where do you go for peace? Sorry, it's verse 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. Where do you go for peace is my question to you. When you need a bit of peace, where do you go? As I thought about it this week, I think we go two ways with it. And this is mostly basing it on the people that are closest to me and people that I know. For peace, and maybe this changes over time. For peace, we either try and get away from stuff, or we try and get to the bottom of stuff. Does that sound reasonable to you? In terms of finding peace, try and get away, far away, go on holiday. Some of us are just back from holiday. Try and go on holiday, get away from stuff, or try and deal with the thing, get to the bottom of it. And some of us run away more often. Some of us get to the bottom of it more often than not. The problem is, and we can say this because lots of us back on holiday, some of us are blessed enough to go away again, we can't get far enough away from the stuff to get actual peace. We'll always be running away. There'll be no holiday long enough this side of eternity. And we can't always get to the bottom of the problems. We get to the bottom of the pile and we're like, oh, no, there's some more stuff there, actually. This peace is different than that. This is not just peace at the end, peace without anything. This is peace that is also in the middle of the mess. Check it out in verse 3 and 4. David's got peace, but it's still chaotic. You, Lord, are a shield around me, my glory, the one who lifts my head high. I call out to the Lord, and he answers me from his holy mountain. I lie down and sleep. I wake up again because the Lord sustains me. I will not fear, though tens of thousands assail me on every side. Do you see that? The backstory to this, David's legging it out of his home. He's not allowed to be in his home anymore. He's been chased away. He's getting shot at. He's getting slandered. Everybody's talking ill of him. Everything in his life is still getting worse. He's not gotten away from anything. He's not got to the bottom of anything. It's all still happening. And yet, in that sound, his head's up. You can see in the verses that come after this that he's sleeping and he's shielded. He's got peace in the chaos. The peace that God brings us is peace at the end. It is peace away from stuff. It gets to the bottom of stuff. But beautifully also, it's peace in the middle of the rubbish. Peace in the middle of how difficult it is. And there's a clue that's in verse 3. Normally when you read the buts aren't always helpful. In this psalm, the but is the Savior. The clue is in verse 3. But you. In the middle of the mess, but you. But you, O Lord, are a shield around me. Peace comes with the stated remembrance of who God is. You lift my head up. You're the shield around me. You're the Savior. If I say that out loud and I believe it, then there's peace. Anybody watching the Freddie, don't put your hands up, I'm not looking for that, just like an inner nod. Anyone watching the Freddie Flintoff, because I've done this before, I've said, anyone watching, I've been preaching at churches and everyone's just gone, no, which breaks the heart of the preacher. So don't reveal it if you're not watching it. I imagine that you might be, or you've heard about it. The Freddie Flintoff documentary. If you're not watching it, it's just gorgeous TV. It's just amazing telly. I don't know if you know what's happened to Freddie. He had a horrific accident. And he'd promised this bunch of lads from Preston a tour to India. And it had all gone. It had all collapsed because of this accident. You know, it had all gone. There'd been difficult conversations with these lads, and what would happen to these lads would be they'd had a 15 seconds of fame, and then it had all gone. And everything had forgotten about, and nobody would notice them ever again, and they wouldn't get any money, and their lives would just go back to normal. But there's a lovely, that's what makes it good telly, and I'm happy to say if it's not, that's what makes it good telly. There's a but in this story. Freddie's got a fairly big heart, so it turns out. Or at least he's got a big heart for ordinary lads from Preston. And he'd made them a promise. And though it all looked lost, if you watch the documentary, it comes out in little bits and bobs as it goes along. Though it all looked lost, because of who he was and the connection that they shared with him, they couldn't let it go. It was a comfort for them. They knew it. But it's Freddie. And if you watch it, there they are in India. It came true. Our peace comes through that same way, that same but. We can be screaming out. We can be in the middle of brokenness, but we have a connection. We have a hope. We have a story in Jesus that changes everything. Look at the but that David holds on to. But you, O Lord, are a shield around me. You're my glory. You're the one who will lift my head up. You're the one who will hear me. You're the one who will help me sleep. You're the one who will help me sleep for a long time. You're the one who will give me peace forever. You're the one who will help me despite the odds. He's a shield for us. Read through the character of Christ. Read through the story of Jesus. He shoves himself in the way of everything to help people. That is who he is. Whether he's just walking about and talking to people, he throws himself in the way of people to help people out. And ultimately on the cross, he throws himself in the way of God's anger for us. He is a protector. He is a shield. Jesus, whatever you're going through, whatever difficulty you're going through, whatever you want to stave off, if you're with Jesus, he's with you. He lifts us up. You look at the character of Christ, but Jesus lifts us up. He's always fighting the case of the wronged and the marginalized. He's always doing that. It's just who he is. You can't forget it. Justice always accompanies him. Everywhere he goes, he's lifting people's heads up. He's fighting their cause. And because of who he is, he's winning their cause. And because of what he did, he will win their cause. Hope always comes with him. Don't know where your head's at the moment. Don't know if you'd say your head's up or your head's down. With Jesus, you can know that your head's going to get lifted up. He sustains us, verse 5. I'll lie down and sleep. I hang on to my Savior for this. I don't always sleep. I don't know how you're going with that. With Christ, it's not just that we can get one night's sleep. David says here, I wake up again because the Lord sustains me. What he's saying there is, I know that he's got the whole future. It's not just whether I'm going to get off to sleep for these next couple of nights. David's looking out and going, he's got everything to come. He's got my lifespan and he's got eternity. I know that he's got that because I've seen what he's done on the cross. That's what we can say. That is our hope. But Jesus sustains us. You're not hanging on for one night's sleep here. You've got eternity to look into with confidence. And lastly, and I think most lovelily, if that's a word, he shows that you can face whatever odds. I will not fear, though tens of thousands assail me on every side. This is what Jesus shows us. It's blown me away in the last couple of days to think about it like this. We've got every reason to fear the baddies, life circumstances, how harder it gets. And yet we hold on to Christ and we see him stand in the way of everything and come through good. Our story of peace is not a story of getting to the bottom of it, although God will. It's not a story of eternity away from it, although that will happen. Our story of peace is a peace that's right now, and it's but Jesus. In Christ, we can have peace. What's your song? What's your go-to song right now? What's your tune? You're going to need to find a good tune to get you through this life. Who are you crying to? Where do you let off your steam? Do you want peace? Cry to him.